Okay. Again, a subset of this question, what's the difference between your partnership with the Messiah and your partnership with other disciples? Is that partnership with the Messiah equal? Well, let's talk about the share, because partnership is koinonia. In the Greek, it has to do with the share. Do we have the same share as the Messiah, this kind of thing? Well, first off, Hebrews tells us that when the thing that we call the local Yahweh or the glory or the Shekhinah, there's all kinds of terms, the wisdom of God, when that thing, according to Philippians 2, was in the form of God, but then decided to not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but then emptied himself, taking on the form of a slave, okay, being made in the likeness of a man, in the likeness of a man. He took the form of a slave, becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. This kind of picture, that's Philippians 2. Well, Hebrews will talk about that same phenomenon, but it will say he had to be made like his brothers in every respect. He became a human. So in that sense, the idea that he breaks rank on purpose. Now, there was no have to. That's what makes the gospel so alarming and so shocking and so scandalous. He chose this. This is behind, for example, what Yeshua says when he hears his apostles arguing about who's greater. Another way to say that would be they're arguing about who gets, if we divvy up the partnership, who gets more of a share. Okay, and he will say to them, you will not lord it over people like Gentile authorities, which is demonic authorities, like you see in the Tower of Babel, like you see in Egypt, like you see in Empire, in Babylon, and Nineveh, and Assyria, okay? You won't do authority the way the Gentiles do, okay? Where they lord it over people and subjugate them. Instead, the greatest among you will be the least. And then who does he use as an example? Himself. He says, for even the Son of Man, which is an ambiguous phrase. Yeshua is tricky on purpose. When Yeshua uses the phrase, by the way, this is how tricky he is. When Yeshua uses the phrase Son of God, he is referring to his human role, in part. Largely, he's referring to his human role. Oh, that's a watch, cool. when he uses the phrase Son of God, he's referring to his human role largely. When he uses the phrase Son of Man, he's referring to his divine role largely. He's very confusing, partly because of Daniel 7, Ezekiel 1, a being that looks like the Son of Man. In Daniel 7, a being in the form of a Son of Man comes to the Ancient of Days and is given glory and honor and worship. Okay, this is one of the verses Yeshua quotes about himself. And how does Caiaphas, the high priest, respond to this? We don't need any more evidence. He tears his robes and says we should kill him, because ancient Jewish exegesis of this text, I think even Talmudic exegesis will say, in Daniel 7, the Ancient of Days is God coming in peace, and Daniel 7 is God coming as a man of war in Exodus 14. So they say they're both Yahweh. There are two powers in heaven. That's how they read Daniel 7. So when Yeshua says he's the Son of Man, they don't know what the hell he means. Are you talking about like Ezekiel? He says Son of Man is just like a dude, a human? What do you mean? He'll use the definite article, not a Son of Man. So he's confusing. The Son of Man? What the heck? He's very tricky, okay? What he's meaning is he's talking about the local Yahweh, who's in the form of a Son of Man, okay? Who is the Son of Man, who is the image of God. So very, very tricky. And so in the sense that he emptied himself, he said the Son of Man, remember we're going back, the greatest among you will be the least, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but rather to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. This is partly like, this dovetails into Isaiah 53, well really Isaiah, the servant songs. There is a servant that's going to come. That when God comes to earth, when the kingdom of God comes, will God come as a tyrannical king? Will God come as a warmongering king? No. When God comes, he comes as a slave. He appears as a slave. It's a bizarre, this is the gospel. Okay, God comes as a slave. So he actually, to take it further and flip it on its head, not only is his share not equal, he becomes our slave. He puts himself beneath us. And so in that sense, he subjugates himself beneath us for our good. And then in the other sense, because he entrusts himself to the Father, the one who judges justly, he is then put in control of everything and put above everything, every name to be named, even the name Yahweh, okay? And so it's a reversal. The cool thing is it's like a slingshot theory, like Interstellar, the movie. Like, it's the idea that he came down from heaven, and when he gets brought up, he doesn't just get brought up by himself. He brings with him a train, things on earth. So that's how the earth gets redeemed in a way. So the share, he in one sense, he doesn't share anything. He's been given all authority in heaven and on earth. In another sense, because he became our slaves and said, you're going to be my wife and be joined to me and be one flesh. I'll be the head, you'll be my body. You'll be hidden in me, incorporated into me. Whatever I have, you have. Okay. So there's a lot to be said about that. Okay, GoPro, stop recording.